About 50 years ago, an astronaut returning from the moon experienced things that he couldn't find a scientific explanation for. So, with some colleagues, he launched a new science focused on the mind and how it works in the body and across space and time. It's the field of Noetics, where the tools of modern science are used to help us understand how what we think and feel affects us and the world around us. Now, this is Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments from the studios of KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon.
This is Noetic Moments, the show that explores what consciousness is, what it does, how it works, and how our lives could be much fuller if we understood it better. I am Ruth Miller, a longtime student of consciousness, cybernetics, and culture, and through this series of programs, I'm introducing some of the people whose work has defined this field of research, and I'm explaining some of their ideas and experiments. I'll also explore some relevant news items and answer questions that you send to my email address, ruth@noeticmoments.org. And Noetic is spelled Noetic. Through these programs, we've learned that although the medical world defines consciousness as what we're aware of right now, most of what goes on in the mind is not in our conscious awareness at all, but goes on in unconscious processes. From Jung and Freud and other early researchers, we learned that our minds can be thought of as having three different realms of consciousness. Our normal awareness, what we call the conscious mind, then what keeps our bodies going and includes our fears and beliefs about threats and dangers, the subconscious mind, and what connects us with our highest ideals and guides us in our actions, the superconscious mind. We learned that we can change our state of consciousness, so we're aware of different aspects of mind at different times. And then we learned that the brain modifies whatever sensory signals it receives to fit past patterns of experience, following a default network or structure in the brain. This means that we perceive, we see, hear, taste, smell, and feel what our brains expect to experience based on the past. We learned that no one has yet been able to pinpoint how ideas and thoughts are formed in brain tissue, and we saw that our body often responds faster than nerve impulses or chemicals can travel, and before we're aware of it. Some experiments have even demonstrated that a person's mind continues to perceive and process for as much as several hours, even when the brain and heart are flatlined and the person has been declared dead. Based on all of this, many scientists have come to accept that what we call mind is not the product of the electrochemical activity of the cells making up the brain, but is in fact the activity of a field that surrounds and permeates the brain and body. It's possible to measure at least a portion of this field as electromagnetic activity for several inches around the body in what some say is an egg shape, extending from below our knees to a few inches above our heads. Mind, then, is a field, a pattern of energy that exists whether the body is functioning or not, and permeates and develops with the body and the brain. This means that the brain is best understood as a receiver-transmitter, receiving messages from the mind and transmitting them to the body, and receiving messages from the organs and the senses and transmitting them to the body in what we call the subconscious mind. Some researchers are exploring how the two hemispheres of our brain are involved in this information transmittal and receiving. From the world and focusing on analysis through the left hemisphere, and apparently from our mind mostly through the right hemisphere. We've learned this field of mind affects energy and matter in a variety of ways. For example, there have been many experiments in quantum physics where the subatomic building blocks of the universe show up as energy or matter, depending on whether a mind is present to observe them. We've seen that people's bodies and their pets have been observed to change when someone connected with them turns attention their way, no matter how far away they are. Individuals and the collective human mind are changing the readouts from random number generators in computers on the network of computers run by the Global Consciousness Project. Now, every field is a unique pattern of vibration that's different from other fields. And it's possible for different fields to vibrate along similar patterns, resonating with each other. So minds that resonate affect each other across space and time. As a result, a growing number of scientists are seeing our individual mind as part of a larger field, equating mind ultimately with the quantum or zero-point field out of which all matter and energy arise. And some researchers are using the equations of quantum mechanics, relativity, and computer learning algorithms to describe the role of consciousness in the formation of matter. Together, these understandings and researches are helping to explain things like the law of attraction, how the world around us mirrors what our consciousness is focusing on, accessing information through insight, intuition, and channeling, how dreams affect the body and consciousness, how music affects the brain, the body, and connections with other fields of mind, how we can enhance or slow down healing through our thoughts, emotions, and visualizations, and how the belief in a treatment can help a patient experience healing in the placebo effect, how remote viewing and telekinesis work, and how we can get into a state of flow in which the mind and the brain are in sync, maximizing our effectiveness. You can catch up on our past shows on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where you'll find links to the clips, books, and authors that I mention for more and more of the shows every week. Well, some time ago, we talked a bit about music and the effect that music can have on us, both generating it and simply enjoying it. I thought we would take that a next step this time. We've been talking about how the brain functions and how the different parts of the brain are acting as receivers and transmitters. But the brain is not the only way we receive information. It is not the only way that we experience the universe. We actually have other modes of experience. And one of those is the vibrations that the body is sensing. I think you know what I'm saying when I say that. If you're around an engine that is vibrating at a very deep level and you can feel it in your body, or at a very high-pitched sound and you can feel that in your body, whatever it is that you are dealing with in this world, we experience it not just through the brain, but through the very cells of our body. Now, over the time we've been doing this show, we've talked about Rupert Sheldrake and his theory of morphic resonance and his experiments around the sense of being stared at and dogs being aware when their owners are coming home, things like that. Well, he's getting interested in a new realm of resonance. I thought I'd let him talk to you about it.
Mantras are sacred phrases used in different religious traditions. They're not words that necessarily have a direct meaning, but they're sounds that we produce. They're vibratory patterns. And if people have used the same mantra over many years, then when you chant the mantra now, you'll come into resonance with all those who've chanted it before. I got interested in this partly through the work of my own wife, Jill Peirce, who teaches workshops on chanting and meditation and working with mantras. And the interesting thing about a mantra is that when you chant it, there's a resonance at three different levels. First of all, there's the literal sonic resonance in your own body of the chanting. Secondly, there's the resonance with other people. If you're chanting in a group and you're chanting together or singing together, you're breathing at the same time. Your whole physiology is coming into resonance. And thirdly, there's the morphic resonance with all those who've done it before.
So he's talking about chanting. He mentions also being in a group, and those of us who have sung in a choir, have sung close harmony, especially in a choir, have felt that resonance that happens when our voices are harmonizing and our bodies are breathing, and there's that marvelous, harmonious coherence that happens. And the same thing can happen in a room full of people chanting any of the ancient sounds that have been found to have power. There is this vibration that is happening in the body and in the room and in the resonance between the people. And as Rupert Sheldrake pointed out, there is a morphic resonance with the ancient chants, with all those who have gone before. So our chanting it builds on the work and the experience and the hours of chanting that thousands of people have done over thousands of years. Now, when he does his little experiment, he's suggesting two things. One is he's using a Christian term that is often repeated many, many times in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. In the Western, we say Amen. In the Eastern, they say Amen. And that E sound has a little more resonance than the eh sound or the a sound of Amen. So having a group of people chanting Amen can have an impact. Perhaps what I just did has an impact. So then another suggestion that he uses is the truly ancient term. It was first used in writing at least 3,000 years before the current era, and probably had been repeated for 1,000 or more years before that in the Sanskrit Vedic tradition. And this, of course, is the OHM or AUM sound. Notice the range of tones in that sound. In the Sanskrit tradition, we are actually making all of the sounds of the universe simply by chanting that one word. And as we do it over and over again, we have the effect on the body of a new kind of coherence, a new kind of harmony in the body. We have a new level of awareness that is outside of our normal thinking process, which, as we have been describing over the last several months, is a good thing to do. Because our normal thinking process has not served us very well. It's gotten to where we are now. But with all the distress that we have been experiencing on this planet at this time, we want to get beyond it. We want to transcend it. We want to have that way of thinking no longer be our normal default mode. So chanting is one way. The word Amen, if you want to say it rather than sing it, can be repeated many times over. And it actually comes from the ancient Hebrew. It's not a Christian word at all. In the ancient Hebrew, it is a word that means I commit myself to this experience henceforth. I shall walk this narrow path. And that, of course, comes from another idea that is expressed in what we call the Lord's Prayer, where the idea of sin in Hebrew is to trespass, is to step off the path onto someone else's land. So there are narrow paths between people's land, and if you step off, you have trespassed. And in the older form of what we call the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, the line was, forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespassed against us. I fascinated myself because along about the late 50s, early 60s, someone decided to change that in most people's recitation of that prayer from trespass to debt. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And what's really interesting to me is that shift in language paralleled the emergence of revolving credit, where you could borrow money against whatever and pay it off over time and continue to borrow the money on that card. We now know those as MasterCards, Visa, American Express, and Discover cards. So revolving credit and the shift from trespassing to debts in the prayer happened at about the same time. I also would like to note that about the time we were making that shift, we stopped establishing bases and presence in other parts of the world. Pretty much everything we're still occupying, we had occupied at that point. We were no longer expanding into other people's territory. The people of the U.S. had been expanding into other people's territories since, well, the 1600s. And for some perspectives, our expanding into other people's territory could be interpreted as trespassing. So we're no longer forgiving our trespasses, we are forgiving our debts. Isn't that interesting? But back to vibration and chanting and mantras. Repeating the Lord's Prayer sets up a set of vibrations, but it isn't as melodious. It isn't as coherent as simply repeating the Amen at the end. So that's an option there if you want to do that. In the Sanskrit, it's, as I say, Aum. We're opening our mouth, ah, and then we're opening the inside. So first we open the outside, the front with the lips, and then we open up the inside with the O, and then we close the whole thing down with the It doesn't include any of the tongue sounds. It's just the mouth sounds. The Sanskrit idea is the word would have to be some variation on Aum, because that Sanskrit sound is considered to be the sound of all that is. As we continue to understand what consciousness is, one of the things we might want to look at is what are the sounds that we are vibrating in our bodies? Are we chanting or singing songs that are harmonious and congruent with who and what we actually are? Or are we singing and chanting songs that are actually disharmonious and perhaps distressing for the body and the mind? If we pay attention to the words and the natures of the sounds, then perhaps we will be able to achieve that state of consciousness that is fully coherent, that flow state where body and mind and spirit are all in alignment and all is well. Well, if you've just tuned in, you are listening to Noetic Moments, a radio show exploring what consciousness is, how it works, and how our lives could be greatly enhanced if we understood it more fully. I'm Ruth Miller, your host, and that sound tells me it's time to look at a book or answer any questions you email to me at noeticmoments.org, and maybe take a look at what's going on in the news that can help us understand the role that our state of consciousness plays in our experience. I thought we'd continue the exploration of vibration in living systems beyond what it does in our own bodies to discover what it is that's going on in other applications. And on the Good News Network, they are reporting that new research from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which is in Woods Hole up in Maine, shows that sound could potentially be a vital tool in the effort to restore coral reefs. Now, if you have ever done any diving near a coral reef, you may be aware that there's lots of different kinds of sounds. There's croaks, and there's drumming, and there's grunts, and there are things that sound like purrs, and there's the crackling and snapping of shrimp and crabs and clams. And scientists have come to believe that the larvae, the part of coral that can move around, actually uses that set of sounds to help them determine where they should live and grow. So what they've been doing is playing a recording of healthy reef sounds to encourage new life in damaged or degraded reefs. Now, you may be aware that as the ocean temperature has changed, its salinity has changed, as we've polluted the waters, as we've done all kinds of things as human beings on this planet for the last 100 years, the reefs have been damaged in many, many parts of the world. And some of them have begun to be replaced with concrete structures that allow the coral larvae to attach themselves. Others have other forms of structures being put in place, and it's making a difference. But the larvae haven't thrived. And so in a paper that was published in the Royal Society Open Science, these researchers demonstrated that broadcasting the soundscape, all those funny grunts and whirs and snaps and crackles of a healthy reef, caused the coral larvae to settle at a much higher rate, up to 7 times more often. So you can go to a reef that's degraded in some way, says one of the researchers, and add in the sounds of biological activity from a healthy reef, and that seems to help the larvae select where they're going to spend the rest of their lives, because once they are mature, they are physically in place. The larvae swim, we think, at the very least they drift with the currents, seeking out the place where they will settle, and then they affix themselves to a structure that feels right. In the past, we've looked at how light and chemistry can afford that. In the past, researchers have seen that light and the chemicals affect how that decision is made. But this group of folks at Woods Hole are also looking at science. This was published in not only the Royal Science paper, the Royal Society's paper, but it was summarized in thegoodnewsnetwork.org. And if you are at all willing to do a media fast and make your shift from the bad news networks, you might want to check out the Good News Network. Your body and your mind will appreciate it. Also on the area of vibration. Okay, so this is specifically a specific set of sounds, but we have to recognize those specific. Now, this research is focusing on a specific set of sounds, but we have to recognize that sounds are vibrations. So it is the pattern of vibration in the seawater of a healthy reef network that these larvae are responding to. So just as our bodies respond to certain patterns of vibration, other forms of living systems respond to certain patterns of vibration in the atmosphere, or in this case, in the water in which they are living. There's a group in Germany that has been going around the world playing music into the ocean to establish communication with dolphins and whales. So they're playing jazz, they're improv, some classical, and they're getting some marvelous responses. There are other individuals doing similar things. And we already know that the vibrations caused by ship motors, submarine sonar, perhaps many other forms of human activity, have been affecting the way that cetaceans, the dolphins and the whales, can live, because they live by sonar and by, vibration, the feedback on the vibrations they put out coming back to them. And a number of people are concerned that a lot of the beachings that we have seen are because our vibration patterns have confused their vibration patterns, and they think they're headed off to the middle of the ocean, and whoops, they're on dry land. And if there aren't people there to keep them moist, they don't survive, which is a really sad thing. So we need to be aware not only of the ways that our own vibration environment is shifting and changing and affecting us, but we might want to pay attention to how it is shifting and changing and affecting others. For example, we're about to have a whole bunch of cicadas out there. They're going to pop again this year, and that's a vibration. That's a vibratory pattern. Is it something that is a positive influence in all beings' lives, or is it something that is going to disrupt things? I'm guessing, because they have continued to thrive and the world in which they normally live thrives with them, that it is somehow a positive contribution. Another one is the constant croaking of frogs. I heard my first frogs of the year the other night, and it's always so pleasant to hear them. I don't know that I could stand to sleep with them all the time, but it's nice to hear them now and then. Their vibration affects us. I live near the ocean. The ocean going back and forth in the waves, but also in the tides affects us. And I remember the first few months that I lived close enough to hear the waves constantly moving, I was awake until I heard that clap that told me the tide had changed. And then I could go to sleep again. It was fascinating to observe. Vibration in our environment is very important. Vibration in our body can be very powerful. So as Rupert Sheldrake was suggesting, we might seriously consider taking up a form of chanting, a form of repeating a sound over and over again that sets up a vibration in our body that is helpful and nourishing and nurturing to our cells, that we now know are always in vibration and are synchronizing their vibrations with each other and with what the heart's main vibratory pattern is establishing as what the HeartMath Institute calls the conductor of the system that is our body. Well, we are out of time for today. But remember, you can continue the exploration on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where there are always links to archived past shows. We're catching up slowly but steadily. That will put you in touch with the titles and the resources we refer to on the show, and where you can send me your comments and questions, which I'll do my best to get answered the next time I'm on the air. For now, thanks for joining me here at Noetic Moments, recorded in the studios of beautiful KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon. And have a great week.
You've been listening to Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments. This program is produced in the studios of KXCR Community Radio in beautiful Florence, Oregon, supported by you, our listeners. Our theme music is Tumbling Planets, composed and performed by Jeff Lovejoy. To hear this program again or learn more about Noetic Sciences, search our website, www.noeticmoments.org.